what's distinct about the prayer service of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? It's different from all of the other Tefillot. It's the title of tonight's talk. What is it? What's the magic word? What's the word? What's different about our Tefillah? We have Musaf, of course. Yeah. Okay. But I mean, if you think about how we daven, how we pray every day, how does the blessing for healing end every day in the Amidah? Olei Amo Yisrael. That's right. Gaal, Goel, Yisrael. What happens on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur? All of a sudden, all of a sudden, we are pushed into a universal framework. And I want to know why is it? Where does it come from? So that's what I want to explore with you. We'll take a moment and watch it, never look at it. But it's not a good habit. So first of all, I want to say that one of the reasons that I sort of chose this or moved in this direction is I think that generally universalism is not part of our Jewish discourse. We don't, when I spoke the other night, we had a small group at Darche, and I was talking about this. So someone came up to me afterwards and said, in the shul that I go to, my rabbi would never say anything like this. As if universalism was something, I don't know, a dirty word. To some might say that universalism is a Christian category, because Christianity claimed to be a universal religion, and we Jews, we are sort of the depraved particularists. We only think about ourselves. And we're accused of being exclusive, isolationist, separatist, and they, give me a bad word, and it's been attached to the Jews over the centuries, and it was a charge that Christianity made against Judaism. We're legal, we are narrow-minded legalists, and it emerges in some ways out of the Gospels. We see some of that polemic. Now, David Hartman taught us the very opposite. David Hartman taught us that actually our particularism is the guarantor of universalism. But I want you to think about it. The fact that we claim a particular approach is a way of saying, if you want to look at it this way, that there are other particular approaches, and that those particular approaches have legitimacy. Sort of an amazing awareness that you have. To be particular means to generate other particularities, or at least recognize other particularities. Then the magic is to realize that it's by combining all the particularities that you have universals. So you need this basic awareness. And on the contrary is that the universal religions, unfortunately, are the most intolerant, because there's a tyranny to universalism, which is what? What's the tyranny of universalism? Our way. Our way is you have to become one of us, right? And by the way, we love you. We want you to become one of us. We'll force you to become one of us because we want you to be redeemed. And if you refuse, we'll even hasten your redemption by killing you. So you can, in other words, think about the history of universalism and how it had, I think, damaged religion and damaged human relations and sort of distorted our perspective. Now, where does the universalism of Judaism, where does it come from? My very good friend and my teacher, Yisrael Kman, so he once came with a Tanakh. So I don't have Tanakh with me, and he took the Tanakh like this. He took the first part of the Tanakh, he said, this part is particularist. He took a chunk of the last part of the Tanakh, and he said, this part is particularist. But this part is universalist. What's that part that he was pointing to? It's the prophet, right? It's the Nevi'im. Those of us, I don't want to take a poll here, but if you're a yeshiva bacher, right, then you can all, I think, bemoan the fact that we basically didn't learn the prophet. So we didn't have exposure to this theology. And the prophet who in many ways centered universalism was Yeshayahu, right? And you should be familiar with it because the title of the talk that I have on the sheet actually, and that Rachel used, we say it how many times on Yom Kippur, although the same is right. My house will be a house of prayer for all the nations. It's an amazing statement, by the way, because it includes a polemic. The polemic is, what's the Beit HaMikdash called in this sentence? What's it called? Beit Tfilah. Not Beit, what else? What would you think it could be? Not Beit Korbanot. So that the actual formulation is a new understanding of what the temple is. The temple is not a place of sacrifice. The temple is a place of devotion. And it has the potential to include everyone. We're going to come back, I hope, be able to come down to that. Okay, now, so with Yeshayahu, by the way, Yeshayahu introduced the idea because monotheism, I'm sorry, I have to back up for a second. The notion of the universalism of Judaism and religion is linked to the idea of one God, right? That's a basic understanding. And in some ways, I also came to the more sociological understanding of the notion of God. God is the guarantor of the oneness of humanity, right? If there's one God, we're all the children of the same God. So there's a social dimension to religiosity that's critical. I think that's one of the reasons that I'm sort of a big advocate for religion. But rather than religion damaging the possibility of human connection and being divisive, religion can be potentially the force for unification and for a sense that we all are essentially linked. And that's very important to me in terms of the grounding of religiosity. And it also, it's what we tend to call the ethical moment. Ein od milvado, there is none other than him. It's not just that there's one God. In other words, that it's the God of Israel, we say, is also the creator of the universe. But what we also say is, and it doesn't require that everybody else has to become us. That's sort of the innovative dimension of Jewish universalism and particularism, which we're going to come back to. Now, this emerges out of the prophets. And the question is, where did Yeshayahu get this from? And my contention is that Yeshayahu got it, we can look at our sheets, where I wrote the title on that side of the page, Yeshayahu 45:1. I'm sorry, let me stand in one place. I can't do that. It's not in my nature. I want to be there. All right. So Yeshayahu, listen to this. Ko amar Adonai limshicho lechoresh. Asher hakzafti b'yamino l'rad lefanav goyim umotnei melachim afateach l'ftoach lefanav blatayim usharim lo yisageru. So, he's going to have all this power and so on. But this is God talking to his Mashiach. Why is Cyrus the Messiah? Why is Cyrus the Messiah? I contend with that. Yes, but it's more than that. He not only allows the Jews to go back, but if you look at the next column, and this is from Divrei Hayamim, although you have it elsewhere in Tanakh as well, in Yeshayahu, and in the first year of the Cyrus, king of Persia, so that the word of the Lord spoken, accomplished, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, and he made a proclamation throughout the temple, and writing that, thus said Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth has the Lord given me to build him a house in Jerusalem. Right? So Cyrus was the first king of an empire in human history who did something very different. Because until Cyrus's time, the rule was an empire, you were conquered by another people, your God was defeated, and you had to be a servant of the new God. This continued among the Greeks and the Romans. And it hasn't ended to this day, right? Whether the Russian Empire, the French Empire, whenever it was, you were a subject of the new king, and your religion was subjected to to the new, and your religion was defeated. Your God was defeated in the process. Cyrus was the first one who went around not only with the Jews, but he told all the peoples who had been conquered by the Assyrians, who were brutal and separated people from their own land and exiled them and mixed them up and destroyed their temple. Our Torah says that when we have to destroy the temples of the idolaters, all right, but that's another conversation. All right, but you understand that impulse. All empires destroyed the foundations of the former society. Cyrus didn't do that. He encouraged the peoples to go back to their lands and to develop and build their temples. We were not the only ones. We have the Cyrus cylinder, and the Cyrus cylinder, it's in the British Museum, indicates to us that there was this broad-based type of universalism practiced by Cyrus. Where did he get it from? Yes, your question. Yes, but I think, you see, this is, remember, you're reading the perspective, you're reading sort of a historical episode through the eyes of the Tanakh, which sees Cyrus as God's messenger. But that's our way of reading it. But Cyrus had a policy. It wasn't, I don't think that it was because he had a prophetic experience. He had a practical policy. If I have a vast empire, maybe the best way to rule the empire is to give each individual group the capacity to rule themselves according to their own religious background, and then we can work together. Now, I'm not saying that Cyrus understood the notions of monotheism that I'm going to propose or universalism that I'm going to propose, but he opened the door. And it's in that context, we know that the Yeshayahu, between chapter 40 and chapter 66, the end of the book, what's called Second Isaiah, and by some will end Third Isaiah, whatever, but at least it's not the same Yeshayahu from whom Yeshayahu ben Amos, of the beginning of Yeshayahu, and he lived contemporaneously with Cyrus. And there was something going on in the air that that's what we believe. I mean, that's how we tell the story. All right, because we see the hashgacha. Right, there's a type of divine providence that's represented by Cyrus, but he brought this to all the peoples. I want to also suggest, because you seem to be pushing the idea he was empowered by God, that Cyrus's commitment. How did it come to him? I said it was practical, but it may be linked to his commitment to a Persian religion, which is called Zoroastrianism. And Zoroastrianism was a form of monotheism. Oseh Shalom. Right. How does the bracha go? Yotzer Or, Uvorei Choshech, Oseh Shalom. And what's the original? Uvorei Tara. Uvorei Tara. Now, we think that pasuk is a formulation that is in direct sort of contact and in dialogue with Zoroastrianism, where there were supposedly two forces, but even the two forces, ultimately, the ultimate outcome was that the good would defeat the evil, and that would bring redemption. So there was something, I don't know, look, I'm not an ancient historian. It just seems to be the coincidences and the going on contemporaneously. Something was in the air that Yeshayahu brought forward. So what did he bring forward? Let's take a look. Let's take a look and see what it is that he taught us. Now, before that, I want to remind people, whoever's read Jonathan Sacks' The Dignity of Difference. Now, it depends what version you read. I recommend that you read the first edition, if you can find it, because the second edition is censored. Sacks was forced to censor the book by the Beit Din in London, and what he wrote in the first edition was the following. God is universal. Religions are particular. God spoke to Jews through Judaism, to Christians through Christianity, and to Muslims through Islam. How did we manage, as Jews, to transmit this message that God is universal and religions are particular? By saying that our God is the creator of the world, but not everybody has to worship our God the way we worship our God. What we need is a sense of the oneness of God. God is about oneness. And the oneness of God is translated, or can be, or should be translated into the oneness of humanity. And that is the universal dream and ideal. So how does Yeshayahu present this to us? Let's take a look on the second side of the sheet and see some of the psukim and see how it's suggested. And then I guess I have to finish. No? I had to finish. The problem is I had to finish before I started. It was a real problem. When you're in that line. U'bnei hanechar hanilvim al Hashem l'sharto. So what is it? Who are these nilvim? Nilvim? Nilvim. What's the root of nilvim? Connect. You know the word. Think about in Jewish tradition we have a Kohen. Levi. What's a Levi? What's a Levaya? Accompanying Hanilvim. Who are these Nilvim? What are these Nilvim? Do you know this? That in antiquity there were people who were not Jews who were accompanying. They were observing Judaism. Why were they observing Judaism? Why? They kept Shabbos. They admired it. You know, I know it's hard for you to believe. People admired Judaism. Shabbos was a social revolution. Nobody in the ancient world knew that it's possible that people deserve a day of rest. There was no day of rest. Right? You were a lord, you rested, you could rest all the time. You were a serf, you worked all the time. Right? And you worked for subsistence. I mean, you didn't have a way of resting. I mean, there's someone said everyone should rest, slaves should rest, the world should rest. Who heard of something like that? So there's a revolutionary message. Jews were exiled. They lived among Babylonians. So you have in Zechariah, you have this among at the end of the temple, before the temple was destroyed, and after the temple was destroyed, all sorts of assertions of people who are getting close to Judaism, or getting close to what became Judaism in Babylonia. Hanilvim al Hashem, l'shorto, lavad shem Hashem, v'yoko lavadim. Avadim here means devoted servants here, not slaves. Kol shomer Shabbat mechalalo. They were observing the Shabbos. Right? That's before the rabbi said, Goysha Shabbat chayat mitzvah, right? We don't, it's not in the Tanakh. That understand. But I'll say a word about it as well. Then we have in chapter 66 in Yeshayahu an amazing assertion. V'gam mehem mekach la'kohanim la'liyim mamash. Who's gam? Who's mehem? Who's mehem? From among them I will take to be priests and Levites. From the Gentiles, who are associated with you, who are coming. And then earlier in Yeshayahu, this doesn't exactly fit into the pattern of the last chapters, but we have the most amazing prophecy that in chapter 19, that at the end of days, there'll be a road from Assyria to Egypt and going to Eretz Israel. And if you look at the last verse 25 on the bottom, whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, these three nations, blessed be Egypt, my people, Egypt, the oppressors of Israel, and Assyria, the brutal oppressors of Israel, and Assyria, the work of my hand, and Israel, my inheritance. Slichot, we're going to be a triplet, the three of us, the three nations. So Yeshayahu has a grand vision to bring the people together. This is expressed, and here I'll tie it together. This is expressed in our tefillah. Take a look at it. The little sheet said there. We start off right. So you see that, you understand what is the goal of this worship of God and standing in awe before God. That the Yasu Fulam Aguda Echat. We will all become one unified humanity. That's the central prayer in each one of the prayer services of Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur with which we begin. When I was teaching the other day, so the person came over to me and said, in my shul, if they would have been teaching this, they would say, Kulam Aguda Echad refers to Jews. Now, halavai, the Jews should come together and be one. That's we understand the difficulty. It's very difficult for Jews to feel a sense of oneness. Imagine the difficulty of humanity feeling a sense of oneness. And why it's so important to be able to stress. I mean, that we have to give people a consciousness, A, that it's possible, B, what the implications are, and how, and what it could yield in terms of not only human, but in terms of political politics, which is the point that I'm coming to in a moment. And so from the first paragraph, which emphasizes a sort of this universal sense of oneness, we then, which is interesting, that we start with the universal in a way, just like the Torah starts with the universal. You know that, right? The first 11 chapters of the Torah are a universal heading. And we also know from modern scholars that the first 11 chapters of the Torah were the last chapters added to the Torah. As if someone purposely said, we need a universal frame to begin our story, which is very interesting. Because I would want to tell, what does Rashi say? The first question in Rashi is, it should start with Jewish stuff. It should start with law, with halacha. It should start with hachodesh halachem. This month is for you the first month. Rashi's question is, why is the Torah starting with the universal? With the universal, it should start with us. The New Testament doesn't start with creation. The Quran doesn't start with creation. The Torah starts with creation. That's why, by the way, I like our year, even though we know the world is not 5,786 years old. What's wonderful about the fact that we count 5,786 days, that we count from creation and not from the beginning, not from Abraham, not from Moshe, not from Sinai, none of that. Think about that. That's what's being instilled within us. You're part of humanity. Don't lose that. I know it's difficult. You feel as if humanity is alienated from you, has alienated you, and has put you aside. But don't lose that, because you have a message to bring, despite the fact that you've been rejected. You carry a vision with you that can bring unity and hopefully some redemption to for all the suffering that we experience. So then we move from the universal, from the general to the particular. But even that paragraph ends with the Mashiach. Now, it doesn't say that the Mashiach is going to rebuild the temple. On the contrary, because from there it moves to the last paragraph, which tells us what is the outcome of this sort of universalism that's linked to particularism as Jews. So we take this universal idea and we say, we have a task. And the task is that wickedness has to be vanquished and eliminated in the world. Now, how do you eliminate wickedness in the world? You have to get involved, unfortunately, in politics. I say that because of not only because of the fact that politics. We need to sort of grow up. I think politics is part of life. You can't be a human being without being political. I mean, the great philosophers define human beings as political individuals. But it is dangerous. Meaning it can be very divisive. And I can tell you by experience, and it's not always constructive. But we have that what the teaching is doing us. It's linking the theological with the political, and it's saying the theological framework of universalism and particularism lead the Jews to try to transform the world. How are we going to transform the world without being involved? And I think it's really imperative that groups discuss these issues instead of hiding from the discussion. Now, maybe the pulpit, I don't want to get involved whether the pulpit is the right place or the wrong place, but nevertheless, we're running away from something that's so urgent. And we see this debate about whether it's appropriate. It has to be appropriate. We have to hear the different voices. And we have to be able to develop an agenda that's going to be able to work toward this transformation. Now, the Rosh Hashanah Yeshayahu program, I want to end is with the Rambam. If I can read it, read the Rambam and then we'll conclude. Okay, you see that on the bottom of the page. Yes. actually, even before that, 1 second, turn to the other side. I just want to read one more first because it's a wonderful frame for what I'm going to say. The pasuk from Micha. Now, Micha riffs on Yeshayahu. You know, Yeshayahu says, "Well, Cherev, the great prophecy of Yeshayahu." So Micha quotes Yeshayahu, and he says, "Lo yisda goyo goy Cherev," right? There won't be war any longer. And he adds 2 verses, and the last verse that he adds to Yeshayahu's prophecy is, "Tichol ha'amim yokul ish b'shem Eloham, va'anachnu nelech b'shem Hashem Elokeinu le'olam va'ed." All the nations will walk with their God on their lips, and we will walk alongside them with the name of our God forever and ever. What does that mean? That means that Micha's vision of the ultimate redemption is not that we will walk to the temple and everybody's going to declare their fealty to Judaism, the God of Israel. Everybody will declare their commitment to one God, but everyone will pursue their one God in their own way. That's what we call today pluralism. But there's a pluralist vision in Micha. It's connected to Yeshayahu. It's what Sachs was talking about. It's why Sachs was criticized. Because he dared to give the dignity of different words. Lord Sachs.
With publication.
Yes, he wrote, Sachs wrote in The Dignity of Difference. That's the name of the book. The Dignity of Difference. Chapter 3. But get the first edition. Okay? No, because it's barely censored. And all right, I've been asked to conclude because otherwise we'll never get out of it tonight. Right? So I want to conclude. I'm going to tell you the Rambam Balpeh. Right? So the Rambam, the last halacha in the Rambam in the Mishnah Torah is, the last 2 chapters deal with the Messiah, and the last halacha is sort of his ultimate understanding of this period. The rabbis, he said, did not desire the messianic times in order for Israel to rule over others, for us to be superior, for us to impose our way. The Rambam wrote the most wonderful responsum to Obadiah the proselyte. Obadiah said, I went to shul, he was a Christian, he went to shul in Baghdad, apparently. The rabbi told him, he can't say our God and God of our Elokeinu. He can't say that. The Rambam was aghast. Of course you can say Elokeinu, Elokeinu. Anyone who converts is a child of Abraham. But he goes further. He says, we are connected to God, and he quotes the pasuk through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But the convert is directly connected. He's a child of God. So the Rambam asserted something really different. Jewish identity is not biological. Jewish identity is a matter of conviction. That's a very, very different understanding. All right. So, and the Rambam goes on to say that in those days, there will be peace. There will not be warfare. There won't be competition. Why won't there be warfare and competition? Because there will no longer be scarcity. That's right. There won't be any scarcity. And because we will recognize that we have enough and we can share with others, and we can create a world in which all people will work together to do what? To contemplate the truth. This is the ultimate understanding of the one God. We'll understand the oneness of humanity and we'll be able to join together. Now, Rabbi Hershenson, who was a friend of Rabbi Kook, who lived in Jerusalem in the early part of the 20th century and was compelled to leave for all sorts of political reasons, had an understanding of what the third temple would be like. He was writing at the time of the League of Nations. I was thinking about this just the other day because of all the meetings at the United Nations. And I had a meeting downtown, and Hershenson said the following: in the third temple, there will be a hall of peace. All right, there will be a hall of peace. But the difference between the hall of peace in the third temple and the League of Nations is there will not be any flag in the hall of peace at the third temple. So what he's talking about is the ultimate sort of goal is to realize a religion independent of nationalism, and that God transcends national identity, and that we have to be able to bring our nationalism in relationship to something broader than ourselves. How do we do that? Think about something very simple. Someone told me this morning, you better end with some hope. You're guilty. Anyway, so how do we do that? Simple. I was wondering, after COVID, what would it have taken for us to recognize when we say, Avinu Malkeinu, Shlach Refuah Shlema, L'Cholei, Kol Am Va'am? You think that would diminish the prayer? What would happen if we would take universalism seriously and inject a degree of universal understanding in a world where we interact with people? We're no longer a Jewish people who is only being oppressed. We're no longer. There are enemies, but that's not all. We live in a broader world. We interact with that broader world. We're part of it. How do we recognize that in our tefillah, in our behavior? Lastly, there's a pasuk in Shmot. It says, let's get it right. Quote it correctly. Yes. Sheishet Yamim Ta'aseh Ma'asecha. It's chapter 23, verse 12. Ubayom Hashmini Tishbot L'man Yanuach Shomcha V'Chamocha V'Yinafesh Ben Amatcha V'Hageh. It's not my own, but someone noted. The pasuk says, Yinafesh Ben Amatcha. Who is Ben Amah? It's used only one other time in the entire Bible. Yishmael. Yishmael is the son of the maidservant, right? When Abraham banishes Hagar and Ishmael, he doesn't want to name him. He's Ben Ha'amah, right? So Yinafesh Ben Amatcha, the son of the maidservant, V'Hager. Who's Hager? The stranger. Who is that? Think, pun, Hagar. The ultimate vision is that Shabbos will become a day where Hagar and Ishmael join Isaac and Rivka at the table, at the Shabbos table. That's not impossible. You can do that today. I always say that what we believe about the Mashiach is not intended for us to wait. Even though it says Achak Elo, that only means that you have to be patient and work hard. But if you think that this is a possibility in the days of the Mashiach, that there will be ultimate peace, then why is it not a possibility today? No different. So what work are you doing? How are you going to translate what you learn on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur? This idea of maintaining a balance between universalism and particularism in your life. And by the way, understanding them also as checking one another, right? Your universalism prevents your particularism from being chauvinistic, and your particularism prevents your universalism from being tyrannical. So we live with this tension that's very creative, which we can transmit to others, but we need to practice the universalism, put it into our own religious lives and into our own political lives.